Festival One event organiser Graham Burt says postponing the Christian festival just 1 week out is a blow.
My phone's just gone nuts, and so has everybody else's here with texts, Facebook messages, Instagram, everything. The most common word is gutted. So looking forward to it.
The 4-day festival was set to kick off west of Cambridge this Friday. Graham says months of work and major final preparations have come to nothing.
We have a volunteer team of about 600 that help put this thing together, and some of them have been here building for a week or more in some cases, and it's blooming hard when you've been working in the hot sun for days with the anticipation that the work of your hands will be enjoyed by thousands of people, that you've got to then just turn around and take it all down with nobody looking at it, seeing what you've done, and then being able to host anybody and have fun.
Under the red light rules, events are capped to 100 people, spaced 1 metre apart, if vaccine passes are enforced. Without vaccine passes, that number drops to 25 people. But Hospitality New Zealand's Julie White says your local coffee shop or restaurant is still one of the most secure places to visit under red level life.
The hospitality venues under the red traffic light settings are one of the safest places you can actually go out. You know, everyone's vaccinated, we're separated, we know we've been planning for this, we know what to do. What we do as hospitality operators is look after people.
She's asking customers to be patient and follow the public health rules.
It's wearing masks, it's being a little bit tolerant when you're being asked to show your vaccine pass. It's really important that we stick to these rules, because if we can keep Omicron under control, that means that we won't go into a lockdown, and our industry, a lot of them won't survive another lockdown.
And if you need a few hours of escapism, the cinemas are still open. Moviegoers will be seated 1 metre apart and will have to show their vaccine certificate.
It is 8 minutes to 9 and Catherine Ryan is here to tell us what's coming up on 9 to Noon. Welcome back, Catherine. How you doing?
Kia ora, Corin. Great to see you. Kia ora, everyone. This morning, hospital doctors, some anyway, may continue working even after testing positive for COVID-19 in the worst-case scenarios of an Omicron outbreak here. Emergency departments are preparing for chronic worker shortages. We'll hear how. And all businesses are preparing also for having a lot of staff away. About 9:30, if you spent much of the summer holiday barefoot, our guest says keep it up. Podiatrist and founder of the Barefoot Movement, Paul Thompson, with us with incredible details on the benefits for our feet. And after 10, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Chris Hedges, former New York Times war correspondent, but his latest work is all about what working with prisoners taught him. He taught drama and literature. He learned much more. And Stephanie Alexander's in later after 11 too.
Very good, Catherine Ryan. Thank you very much for that. 7 minutes to 9.
Panmure locals are worried for the fate of an iconic retro-style sign, which they say is important to their community identity. An online petition started just last week has nearly 1,000 signatures in an effort to reinstate the Panmure sign that was taken down in 2019 for road refurbishments. Ella Stewart reports.
For 25 years, a 15-metre tall space travel-themed sign stood at the centre of the Panmure roundabout, welcoming locals and visitors to the suburb. The sign, which bears the suburb's name on 7 turquoise-coloured discs, was created in 1994 by engineer John Fallon. But in 2019, Auckland Transport removed the sign and had the roundabout demolished as part of the Auckland Manukau Eastern Transport Initiative. While it was expected to return in some way, an engineer's report found it was damaged in removal, and now the sign is lying at an Auckland Council depot, gathering cobwebs. Panmure Community Action Group Secretary Keith Sharp argues that the town sign is iconic Kiwiana and should be repaired and
Lots of town signs which some people might have thought were a bit kitsch or crass when they first went up, which have become part of the identity of the community. You know, we're talking about things like the L&P bottle in Pyro, the Oakuni carrot, and lots of things like that. For a lot of young people in the town, they'd seen it all their lives, and it was part of their history, part of their background, and they were really attached to it.
He says support for the cause is growing on social media. Keith Sharp says the 1,000 signatures on the petition to return the sign shows the depth of feeling in Panmure.
That is a huge number for a town like Panmure. We expect it to reach the 1,000 signature mark, so the groundswell of support and anger against Auckland Transport is definitely growing.
But in a written statement, Auckland Transport spokesperson Natalie Polly said reinstating the sign was not recommended, as it would be a public safety risk.
The engineering company contacted to examine the sign said that although a new foundation appeared feasible, structuring the existing post doesn't comply with current standards. Retrofitting the existing sign to comply is expected to be very difficult and expensive.
In 2020, Auckland Transport offered the sign to the local board, along with $250,000, as they say it has the legal responsibility for placemaking. But they didn't accept the offer. And while AT said they are continuing discussions with the local board, for now, the sign's fate is still yet to be agreed.
4 minutes to 9. Let's cross the Tasman now. Talk to our Canberra correspondent, Kerry-Ann Walsh. Good morning, Kerry-Ann.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
And to you too. Nice to be talking with you. We're obviously pretty interested in how you guys have been going over the summer with our Omicron outbreak underway here.
Yeah.
Listen, tell us a little bit about schools and the use of rapid antigen tests.
Schools returned strangely. In New South Wales, a lot of them return on Friday. In Victoria and Queensland, not till next week. In New South Wales, the Premier Dominic Perrottet has said that students must take two rapid antigen tests during the week, and by Wednesday, the state would supply students teachers and students, as in schools, with the tests. Now, it's a huge promise because there are none available. There are limited supplies in Australia. The federal government keeps saying, yes, it's coming like Christmas, but Christmas is always just around the corner. And so far, that we're screaming out for rats right across the country. So quite how this regime is going to work is anybody's guess. It's going to be a bit of a schmozzle for the first couple of weeks.
What's the sense there in terms of this wave? Is it the feeling that it has peaked, or have you still, ACT, for example, where are you at there?
About 2-3 weeks ago, we were hovering around between 1,000 and 1,200 a day. We're down to about 600 and 650 a day. In New South Wales at the peak, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, 20, 30, 40,000 a day, quite often more. In one day it peaked at 60,000, but that was also including a bank of rat tests that hadn't been included before. In New South Wales over the weekend they were averaging 20,000 a day. There's optimism that Omicron is at its peak and starting to recede now. It doesn't make it any easier to control because of this extreme lack of rapid antigen tests, the fact that people are still circulating without knowing that they are positive.
Nice to see, though, that the tennis, the cricket, things are still continuing.
Oh, yes, things are still continuing, despite the fact that some of the draw cards were not allowed to play, like Djokovic in the tennis. It's sport is sport, and in Australia we will do everything to make sure it goes ahead.
Yes,
and the tennis has been pretty spectacular this year, that's for sure.
Very good. Thank you very much, Kerry-Ann Walsh, our Australian correspondent. That's us for today. We'll see you tomorrow.
The TUI. RNZ National.
RNZ Pacific News. Kia ora koutou, ko Susana Lei Atawa tēnei. The HMNZS Aotearoa has served hundreds of thousands of litres of water and is busy desalinating more to help volcano and tsunami ravaged Tonga. All its cargo has been unloaded and the 72-hour quarantine period ends this afternoon. Aotearoa's commanding officer, Captain Simon Griffiths, says some of the water will be bottled and shipped to the outer islands, which have been worst affected.
Understanding that water levels and clean drinking water, shortages right across the Kingdom of Tonga, We understand that the water on Tonga Tapu has been cleared to be drunk, so they're slowly being able to use some of their own supplies. For us, just producing as much as we can, as quickly as we can.
New Zealanders collecting donations for Tonga are trying to work out how to get all of the donations from Auckland to the Pacific. The Aotearoa Tonga Relief Committee has held a donation drive at Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland in recent days. Local MP and group co-chair Jenny Salesa says Matson Shipping has donated 15 containers free of charge.
However, there are so many drums of food and donations. Our estimate from the 3 days is that we have filled probably between 20 to 25 containers.
The donations are due to leave New Zealand on Wednesday and should arrive in Tonga by Saturday. The Minister of Foreign Affairs says one of the biggest challenges for Tonga will be planting crops in coming months. Minister Nanaia Mahuta says New Zealand's support includes dry stock food, but she says that doesn't help local crop supply, which need to recover from the recent volcanic eruption and tsunami. Ms Mahuta understands it will take about 3 months for salt water to evaporate from crop lands. She says Samoa and Fiji are providing crops that can be harvested. About 84% of Tonga has been affected by the eruption and tsunami. High sea surges continue to threaten parts of the Cook Islands as a weather system hampers the islands. Yesterday, strong gusts and heavy rain battered Rarotonga, with sea surges flooding low-lying areas and inundating roads with debris. Cook Islands Meteorological Service Director Aronga Ngari says it will be a significant clean-up operation.
2 ports has been damaged in a way with the debris that has been brought into the 2 ports. We have cleared all the boats, the small sailing vessels, out of the 2 ports. Bigger boats have been sent out of the 2 harbours, so they are taking shelter on the lee side of Rarotonga.
Aronga Ngari says the weather system is about 500 kilometres southwest of Rarotonga. New Zealanders are waking up to the new red light COVID-19 setting this morning. A cluster of cases has been identified in Motueka in Tasman District with no known link to the border. Here's RNZ's Craig McCulloch.
The announcement is the first test of the traffic light system against a new foe, the highly infectious Omicron. The red setting is distinct from a lockdown without bubbles or restrictions on travel. Instead, restaurants and other venues will face capacity limits and mask wearing will be more widely required. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, believes it will be enough to slow down the outbreak, but concedes it won't stop it. The government will reveal more details about its plan on Wednesday.
An Australian military aircraft has landed in Honiara, the first of 2 flights carrying emergency medical supplies to support the Solomon Islands' response to an escalating COVID-19 outbreak. The 19-ton package includes 100 oxygen concentrators and 11 COVID-19 kits, which have PPE, medical supplies and equipment to help manage and contain the outbreak. The flights will also deliver a total of 6 tons of UNICEF emergency water and sanitation and dignity kits. The Australian government is also arranging to send a new Gen Expert machine and equipment for COVID-19 test processing, plus a mobile cool room and backup incinerator for waste management for the National Referral Hospital. Police in Brussels have fired water cannon and tear gas to disperse protesters against COVID-19 restrictions. 50,000 people had gathered at the European Commission's headquarters. Some protesters let off fireworks as police advanced in force into a nearby park where large groups of demonstrators had gathered. Protesters in Burkina Faso in West Africa have burned down the headquarters of the ruling MPP party in the capital, Ouagadougou. Police dispersed them with tear gas as they ransacked the building. The activists burned tyres and expressed support for army soldiers fighting the Islamists. The BBC's Mary Harper reports.
The soldiers say they need units specially trained in fighting violent Islamists, as this is a very different kind of war. They want the top hierarchy of the military replaced and far more support, including extra troops on the front line, increased food rations, better care for the wounded, and help for the families of soldiers killed on the battlefield. They issued their demands after hours of heavy gunfire at army bases in the capital Ouagadougou and northern towns.
The head of Germany's navy has resigned over controversial comments he made over Ukraine. Kay Achim Sunbach says the idea Russia wants to invade Ukraine is nonsense. He added that all President Vladimir Putin wants is respect. A number of countries have supplied Ukraine with weapons, including the US, but Germany has refused Ukraine's request for ammunition. To sport, the Fiji Sevens teams missed the Seville Sevens due to positive COVID-19 tests. Several players in both the men's and women's teams returned positive results as part of their exit test after being in 7 days of isolation. Fiji Rugby Union Chief Executive John O'Connor says the results were unexpected, but they had no other choice but to withdraw. O'Connor says the players and management who initially tested positive have since tested negative. In their absence, the United States take on France in the first women's semi-finals, followed by Russia's clash with Australia. In the men's event, South Africa face Australia and England then play Argentina. Nathan Crumpton is set to become the first athlete to represent American Samoa at the Winter Olympics for 28 years. Crumpton is 26th on the men's skeleton ranking, good enough to qualify for Beijing 2022. Crumpton also participated at Tokyo 2020 in the men's 100 metres and is due to become the first person to compete for American Samoa at the Summer and Winter Olympics. American Samoa last sent athletes to the Winter Olympics in Norway in 1994 when a two-man bobsleigh team competed. Tennis Australia has defended the confiscating of T-shirts and a banner posing the question, where is Peng Shuai at the Australian Open? Concerns for Peng's welfare have been raised since she made allegations of sexual assault against a high-ranking Chinese official in early November. Peng, a two-time Grand Slam doubles champion, has rarely been seen in public since. A video on social media shows Australian Open staff asking a spectator to remove a T-shirt featuring the message, and police then informing the spectator the tournament rules prohibit political slogans. Tennis Australia says Peng's safety was the organisation's primary concern. Denis Shapovalov upset third seed Alexander Zverev in straight sets in the Melbourne Heat to reach his first Australian Open quarter-final and set up a showdown with Rafa Nadal. Nadal beat France's Adrian Manarino. A top seed Ash Barty continued her impressive run with a straight sets win over American Amanda Anisimova. Francis Ngannou and outgrappled Cyril Gane at UFC 270 in California to retain his UFC heavyweight crown. Famed for his frightening knockout power, the Senegalese fighter changed tack to deal with the threat of his former sparring partner Gane to win a decision victory before revealing that he had torn knee ligaments in the run-up to the fight. In cricket, South Africa won a thrilling third one-day international against India by 4 runs to seal a series clean sweep. Quinton de Kock made 124 as South Africa were bowled out for 287 with the penultimate ball of their innings. 47-year-old French driver Sébastien Loeb has become the oldest ever driver to win a round of the World Rally Championship after taking up the season-opening Monte Carlo Rally. In the English Premier League, second-placed Liverpool beat Crystal Palace 3-1. Third-placed Chelsea beat Tottenham 2-0, while Arsenal and Burnley drew 0-0. And in Spain, La Liga leaders Real Madrid scored 2 goals in the final 8 minutes to fight back from 2-0 down and snatch a draw at home to Elche and retain top spot. That's the news and sport on RNZ Pacific. You can read and hear more of our stories online at rnzi.com.
Hi, how are you?
How much is your Bitcoin worth now, do you think?
It's currently around the $500 million.
Okay. And media are saying you're about to attempt a last-ditch effort. But I've been reading about you, and it seems to me that you're not going to give up at any stage. You're pretty determined.
Yeah, pretty determined. obviously the value of Bitcoin keeps increasing, so the value of my hard drive keeps increasing. There's no reason to give up.
I know it's a long story, James, but what originally happened that your Bitcoin ended up in your local dump? Essentially, you threw out the wrong hard drive, didn't you?
Yeah, well, one day in 2013, I was doing a clear out in my office drawer of all the equipment that I no longer needed or no longer worked. And in the drawer, there were two near enough identical hard drives, identical looking at least. One of them was a blank hard drive with no data at all on it, 20 gigabytes. And the other hard drive was my former laptop hard drive, the hard drive that came from my laptop. And that contained my Bitcoin wallet, which also contains my private keys. Unfortunately, in a case of mistaken identity, the wrong hard drive was put into the black bag and taken to the landfill site.
Yes, which you had not wanted to do, but your wife did, picked it up and took it. You'd been a very early Bitcoin miner, hadn't you, James?
Yeah, I was involved on February 2009 is when I first joined the network. Started mining middle of February. And I believe I was one of the first 5 to 10 people involved in Bitcoin in the world.
When you mined those early coins, you didn't think your efforts would ever amount to anything. That's why you were a bit careless with which hard drive was which?
I wouldn't say that was the reason why I was careless. It was just a general mistake, a case of mistaken identity. I didn't think that I was throwing that hard drive away. The hard drive that I thought was being thrown away at the time was the 20 gigabyte blank hard drive, which I would have never have used again because of its small size.
Right.
We were using, 3, 4, 500 gigabyte drives as standard by then, so there would be no need to ever use a 20 gigabyte, hence why it was, to be thrown away. So back in the early days of Bitcoin, nobody expected Bitcoin to blow up the way it has. Obviously, there was always the chance, but, anybody who was involved early on, we were there to change money. There wasn't any money-making aspect from Bitcoin early on. It was a very experimental network, and there wasn't many people who were supporting the network in the early days.
And you actually approve of this level of security which has disadvantaged you. I mean, aside from the money you've lost, the whole blockchain modus operandi has your full support, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. If there were a way or a mechanism to retrieve my coins without the original private key, then that would be the case for every other Bitcoin in existence. That would literally turn Bitcoin into a, Excel spreadsheet. If anybody can edit the spreadsheet whenever, that takes away the value proposition of Bitcoin in the first place. It takes away its value.
Yeah. Nevertheless, I can't imagine the ongoing nightmare of thinking what you've missed out on. And yet you have people online, don't you, telling you to move on. Move on, man. Easier said than done.
Oh, definitely. I don't plan to move on. I plan to keep, continuing with my efforts to dig this landfill. We believe that we've put together a professional consortium of businesses that do these tasks on a daily basis. They're experts in what they do. And in each area of expertise, they've told me, yes, we can do this safely. We can retrieve the physical hard drive. And yes, we can recover, there's a good chance that we can recover the data on board. It's very much worth the effort.
You went to the landfill. You saw 10 to 15 football pitches worth of garbage. But then you found out, didn't you, that you could narrow the area down where your hard drive is?
Yeah, over the years, obviously, we've collected overhead images of the landfill, all the way from, when the foundations were first put in, every stage of the build, and we've narrowed it down to a specific area. That's been helped by the former director of operations at Newport Landfill, who retired in 2018, and he's now joined my team, because the way I see it, who better to have on your team than the person who built that landfill? And we've been able to narrow down the area where material was being buried in the summer of 2013, which contains about 40,000 tonnes of waste There's no additional waste going on top on that specific area. So, we've got a set of parameters to work to. It's not an impossible task to dig up that amount of earth and filter through it looking for a specific object. It can be done. It's not an impossible task.
The Newport Council was at first fairly willing to talk about this, but then its attitude hardened, James.